Hey there, Modern Math teacher. Welcome to today's Poolside PD. I got to be honest with you guys and tell you that one of the best things that ever happened to me as a math teacher was being asked to teach multiple grade levels, multiple content areas, right? And honestly, at the time when it happened, I didn't appreciate it enough because when you're teaching Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, intervention classes, all of those or multiple of those at once, it can feel chaotic. But in retrospect, looking back now, I think it completely changed the way that I understand mathematics and the way that I teach it, which is awesome because teaching multiple grade levels forced me to stop seeing math as isolated units and standards and really start seeing it as that one big connected story. And I think every math teacher should spend some time studying above and below their grade level or collaborating with those teachers. Not because you need to become an expert in every course, of course, but because it's going to change how you intentionally teach the students sitting in front of you. So, welcome back. Happy Thursday, Modern Math teacher. In this episode today, I want to talk to you guys about why studying above and below your grade level matters so much, how it changes your instructional decisions, and why understanding the bigger mathematical story makes you a stronger math teacher. Okay, so if you're up for it, let's do this. All right, you guys. So I talked about this a little bit in the last episode that I really enjoy teaching multiple different grade levels, and that's still true. I love it, right? Because for a long time, I think in teacher training, right, like I approach curriculum as like, here's the unit, here's the lesson, here's what students need to do. And when I first came to my new district and I had to go from project-based to following a text in a curriculum, that's still kind of the approach that I took with it. And really, that's not unusual, right? Because that's how a lot of us were taught to teach. You look at the unit, here's the lesson. Okay, here's what the kids are going to do. Great, bada boom, bada bing. Here we go, we got this today, right? But the more grade levels that I taught, the more I started realizing that every lesson is really part of a much larger progression, even within the same unit, within the same text, but then across the grade levels, okay? Students are always building from prior ideas and they're always preparing for future ones. And once you start seeing that, your instruction changes for sure. So one of the biggest shifts for me when doing this was how I started to think about prior knowledge, okay? Because now I wasn't just asking, what did students learn last year? I started thinking and asking myself, like, what are some of the mathematical ideas that they're carrying into this lesson? And what misconceptions make sense based on their previous learning? And which foundations matter most here, right? Some of that comes from my work in my intervention classes, being more intentional with it that way. And others of it just comes from those years of experience of teaching the different grade level content. And it really helps me to become more intentional, especially in Algebra 2, right? Because Algebra 2 has so many concepts to rely on, patterns students have seen in previous years, function understanding, transformations, how the number system is developing and expanding again, right? And if any of these foundations are shaky for the students, they're going to struggle no matter how good or engaging that lesson is. Okay. And, you know, in Algebra 2, this is oftentimes, at least here where I am, it's the last math class they have to take. It is like the highest class that they have to take. Everyone has to take a fourth year here in Michigan, but Algebra 2 is the last required one. And so this is where all of those shaky holes can really start to collapse their Jenga tower, right? So I've got to be really intentional thinking about that. I also want to think about where they're potentially headed next, though, right? Because not only am I trying to like fill in some of these holes and build a stronger foundation for them, I've got to prepare them for what is coming after me. And so studying a little bit above your grade level matters too, because when you understand where your students are headed, you start making different decisions about what to emphasize, what rigor to expect, the vocabulary that you're using, the conceptual understanding that you are building. These are some things that I realized this year. You know, like I used to gloss over some things procedurally because I didn't really understand how important they were or how important they became later. Things like transformations, inverse relationships, completing the square, polynomial structures. Now I think about those concepts differently because I see how they connect to higher level mathematics, future problem solving, and mathematical reasoning overall. Okay, so you want to think of again about where you're at and where your students are at. I think my favorite year was when I taught Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 because I knew exactly the foundational skills they were getting from me in Algebra 1 and how those were going to translate into Algebra 2. And so I could pull back to my Algebra 1 content expertise to support my Algebra 2 students, and I could challenge my Algebra 1 students with like, this is important. You will be seeing this again. Here's how it applies, and giving them a little bit more of that sense of that real world, like, when am I actually going to need this? Because when you're stuck factoring quadratics forever and just learning the procedures, that's boring. But learning that when you get to Algebra 2, you get to come and do a rocket project with me, and that's where the factors are going to come into play when it talks about time to launch and land, and then they got to see the videos of the kids. Like, that gives it a little bit more substance, a little bit more meaning. So big advocate here for you guys to teach multiple grade levels at some point, maybe not all at once. But if you can't, then study again a little above and a little below and talk with those colleagues about what's important, because you really want to help your students develop that strong sense of understanding of mathematics as a full story, right? One of the coolest things about deepening my content knowledge this year was realizing how connected all of that math really is. Whether that was the number system that I talked about in the last one, or transformations, which they've seen since 8th grade, and then how those change in geometry, and relying back to those geometrical ideas to pull them forward into Algebra 2, to think about function transformation there, and then to think about how that's used in advanced modeling when they're going to go beyond me into the pre-calc world. It's just fascinating, right? So when we teach things as disconnected procedures, our students are missing out on that entire story. But when we understand the bigger picture ourselves, we can help our students see that math is something humans developed to make sense of the world, to help them reason and problem solve quantitatively, right? And honestly, that just changes the energy of the classroom. You become much more of those problem solvers, much more thinking is happening. I know a lot of you are working on having your thinking classrooms. And so really helping your students see that connected story is a big piece of that, but they're not going to see it if you don't see it. So you've got to do a little bit of that work yourself this summer too, okay? So all of this really just reminds me of something really important. Teaching math is intellectually demanding work, not because you need to know everything perfectly, but because we are constantly analyzing ideas, making connections, anticipating misconceptions, and thinking about progression. And that's what made teaching feel so energizing for me this year. It wasn't just covering content. It was about understanding the mathematics more deeply alongside my students and going on that travel and journey with them. So that is what I would like to encourage all of you to do over the summer, is just take a little look at what's ahead and what's behind your grade level, so you can start seeing that bigger picture for yourself as well. All right, guys, if you're feeling stuck right now, one of the best things you can do as a math teacher is to study, again, outside of that course, right? Because the more connected your understanding becomes, the more intentional your instruction is going to become too. And honestly, that just makes teaching better for everyone. So if you are trying to be more intentional and think more about meaningful math experiences, conceptual understanding, projects, performance tasks, all of that, you can grab the free guide in the show notes, the Project or Practice guide for Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and middle school math, okay? And remember, if you want to study alongside us in July, when we're going to be reading through Math Therapy together, you can grab that book at the link in the show notes. All right, you guys, that's it for this episode. Until next time, keep it real.